there's a downside to that as well. So that's where we're stuck at this moment.
Thanks, Zafar. I'm just going to interrupt for 1 minute because I did forget to mention that we are recording this session, just so that everybody knows, so that we can go back and review it at a later time. I hit the record button a couple of minutes ago. So just so that everybody is aware, this will be available in the future, and we are recording. So thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Zafar and Marlene.
No problem. Zafar says that he's teaching. I'm not. So I do recognize that there's a little bit of difference now for those who have started a new session, in that when we moved to online, we at least had the advantage of knowing our students prior to going online and having built a community. And I think for those, I don't know how many of you are teaching right now. As I said, I'm not. But I can imagine how much more difficult it is when you're starting with a class where you don't know your students and the students don't know the others in the classroom. So in framing how we thought this discussion might go, and like Barb said, we're hoping that people will come into the conversation, not be shy about getting on the mic and sharing your experiences and best practices as we move forward. But we framed it with the points for the topics that Barb had put up on the screen earlier. And the first one was promoting online classroom etiquette. And the reason we came up with this, I kind of thought that sometimes we may take some of these things for granted, because I was speaking to a colleague recently and found out that she did not understand that when you have an online class that you can't have everyone's mics open at the same time. And she was trying to get everyone's video to be open at the same time. And we were, I don't remember what platform she was using. I don't think it was Adobe Connect. But with most of these classroom platforms, there's a limited number of video feeds that can go through. And so I didn't think, I found out from her that she didn't understand that in a classroom setting where she is presenting, she does not need or should not have, I think, the students' pictures up, because it can be very distracting for students. And of course, not to have all the mics up. And so recognizing that as instructors, we may not all understand that, then as well for students, imagine for students who this is their first time in an online class, what are some of the classroom etiquette procedures that they need to know while online? I don't know if people have ideas for that. We talked a little bit about it today in terms of raising our hands when we want to talk. And I think when we're online, it's very, very important that students understand that, and that instructors have control of the classroom. So like Barb said, she can mute us all when she needs to, or she can unmute us. That it's very important that as instructors, we always have control of the classroom when online.
So anyone would like to comment on their some of the strategies that they're using or questions they have around online etiquette and setting up for success as we are offering remote classes? Again, you can just use your raise hand icon in the bottom. Does anybody have any interesting and amusing stories to share about these challenges that they've had while they've been running their online classes, other than cats walking across the keyboard and, you know, children doing things? Okay, Judy. So I'll go ahead, Judy.
Hi, everybody. This isn't an amusing story. I'll think of whether I have one or not, but I just took an amazing PD session last month. It ran for the whole month. And it was not just about converting your class to online, but also how to build, like some of the things that I think that we're going to talk about today, about building community and really making sure that your students are engaged. And one of the things that we worked on week, which I thought was really cool, was sort of strategies that were informed by sort of trauma, like sort of knowing that our students typically have experienced trauma of some kind, and so sort of trauma-informed pedagogy. And one of the things that the facilitator said was that choice and safety are really important all the time, but also in an online environment. So giving people the choice to be, sort of back to Marlene's point about the video, having choice about whether you speak with your mic or speak on the chat, whether you have your camera on or off, if there's a sign that you can put up that says that you'd like to pass, that you're just not feeling sort of connected enough to speak up on a day. So in our class, we had a coffee cup icon that I think is in Zoom somewhere. So you can put up the coffee cup and it says, that sort of signals that maybe you're having an off day and you just don't feel like participating fully, but you're still present and listening and just maybe not speaking up. So it was just, I really liked the way that she framed that, and just kind of remembering to be as attentive to sort of student experiences when we're online as we are when we're face-to-face.
Absolutely. I think that especially coming on the mic, it takes time for students to feel comfortable doing so. I found that the chat was always going, and only a few students were usually comfortable coming on the mic. I found that students did not want to have their pictures up. So, and I think actually as instructors, it's different here. We're in a meeting and it's a round table, but if we are actually having a class, I remember a couple weeks ago, I was in a workshop and by default, everybody's video is off and everybody's mic is muted. But sometimes people come on and they may unknowingly turn on their video, and it's very distracting for somebody as a participant trying to pay attention to the presenter and seeing somebody who's there and maybe fidgeting and so on, and it's very distracting. So I think we have to remember that for our students, again, if we're having a lesson, we don't need to have their videos showing, because the purpose here is to give the lesson. Now, if we put them into breakout rooms or smaller groups, then absolutely, I would give them the option if they want to open up their videos. And often they only did so if they felt comfortable with the group that they were with. So in terms of, you asked about, Barb, funny or interesting experiences. Well, for one thing, with the chat, I would have a lot of students that would use a lot of slang that I'm just not, or short terms that, because they're so used to chatting, that I have no clue what they're saying. So I have to continually remind them that they have to maybe type out things for me because I just don't know. And I also did have, as I mentioned earlier before most people were on, I had one time where a hacker came in and impersonated students. And so that hacker was saying things that would to try and rile me up. And then the students will say, no, I didn't write that. So I had to be careful with kind of looking at the chats and also just knowing when to engage and when to sort of ignore if it did not seem like something that I needed to address. Any other thoughts on the etiquette? So for me, as I would say, mics are muted. Of course, unless maybe, which most won't have, but if they have headsets, they may be able to keep their mic on because we're not going to get the feedback. But again, it's about reminding students continually about what the etiquette is. And one of the challenges that I think about for our students in particular is, because the students love to use the chat a lot, which is great, and I do encourage it, how do we deal with the spelling mistakes that may come about and people feeling insecure about writing because they know that their grammar and spelling is maybe not as good as others in the classroom? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or on that.
That's really interesting, Marlene. That's something I had not, had not occurred to me. Yes, go ahead. I can see a raised hand there at the top. Jay Stork-Ryers. So don't forget to unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Thank you. It's Jennifer from Georgian College in Collingwood, Ontario. How is everybody?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi,
Sorry,
Jennifer.
I wasn't sure if it was Jennifer, so I didn't want to say your first name.
That's okay. Thanks.
No problem.
Hi, everyone. So my experiences has always been to let students know ahead of time sort of what the game plan is in a written email, which seems to give them a little bit of a preempt of what the expectations are. And it's worked really well because students feel that they have a better risk assessment of their expectations when they get online. And the other thing that I do include in the email is that spelling is forgiven. That typing quickly because we want to get our message across in the chat rooms and things like that, that although recognizing that it has to be in full words and not acronyms or interpretations of short forms, but that spelling does not count in chat rooms. And that seems to really relieve a lot of people, and they're allowed to take that first step for themselves. And, you know, it's a new experience for them, so they feel more comfortable reading what the expectations are. So sending out the email ahead of class on that first day, sort of a mini orientation in an email, has worked really well.
Good.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. Managing expectations, yes, is a good proactive way sometimes to try and address those things. I just see in the chat that Sarah King has posted, from Northern College, has posted something she picked up from a webinar yesterday, where students can make their own avatars if they want to share their look, but not their real face. Even, I have to say, even in Ace Distance, we have some instructors who prefer to post an avatar rather than a picture on their Moodle platform. So I'm sure some of our students might have that same desire. So thanks for posting that, Sarah.
Perfect. So the next topic that we thought would be important is how we go about building a community online. So very, very different than being in the classroom, where we get to see people and build that relationship that way. How do we go about doing it on an online forum?
Okay, so can I speak to that, Marlene?
Yeah.
Thank you. So what I've seen is this particular semester I've been to the virtual orientation that we had with our program, basically support officers, and all these students were doing a Zoom meeting. So this is the first orientation that they did, which was really helpful because we could see who could come in and how many students could participate, ask questions. But when they came in specifically at the end of the meeting, then we had a whole bunch of students staying back, like, okay, if you're here to ask, like, yes, we're here to ask a question, but now, is it okay, a good time? Just like a regular session, when it's over, some students stay back and they ask a question. So we said, why would you wait until, oh, we were not comfortable talking, but now we can talk. Okay, excellent. So keeping that in mind, what I did was I had them assign a paper, like a little assignment that they did, in which they had to introduce themselves, talk about basically their learning philosophy, their expectations, what they think about group work, just throw a whole bunch of terms and what their future goals are, and then ask them to write this to the rest of the class instead of just writing it to myself. So what happened is they could post this on the discussion board that we had in our LMS. And now they get to know each other. They can comment on their little blurb. And this was almost like connect, oh, you're doing this program? I'm interested in this program too. So let's gear up. We can do this, we can do that. So the follow-up the next day where we had the live session, I gave them a few minutes to talk about the assignment and if they want to talk about to each other. So this was a nice way of just letting them get to know each other before they can actually, be confident about themselves and knowing that they're all in the same class trying to get the same goal. And it was really helpful for me. Does anybody else have ideas? Sorry, go ahead, Millie.
So for me, and like I said, I haven't yet started a class where it's fully online. But one of the things that I found helpful at this time in particular, where we're all kind of staying home and not having as much contact with people, was having a cafe hour. And so I would have before class, and it wasn't really an hour, maybe a half hour, where students could just come in and we would just acknowledge how people were feeling, could talk about anything that they wanted to talk about. Sometimes I would post a menu so they come in, and just ways to sort of relax the group before class, and just to acknowledge the anxiety that people are feeling at these times. And so I found that helpful. Also, using breakout rooms, I've had sort of hit and miss with the breakout rooms, but using the breakout rooms have been a good way to put people into smaller groups and getting them to work. Depending on the group, however, some groups were great, other groups are not as chatty. So some groups would chat maybe only using the chat box. Others would open up their mics and talk with each other, and really enjoyed that. But it was their way of just kind of being able to speak with each other openly. And so that I found also useful. I don't know if other people have ideas in terms of building a community.
Hi, Marlene. It's
Hi,
Arlene
Arlene.
here. I've used breakouts a lot too, mostly with good success, and I've learned how to use them even better as I go through it. But I've discovered that it is a great way to build online collaboration. The students do like to meet in small groups. I really structure it. I use my cooperative learning skills to really structure it by saying things like, okay, it'll be a round robin. The person who lives closest to the Ottawa River will go first. You'll take 20 seconds and each maybe describe one skill you've learned since early March, and then I'll have a specific question for them, a content question or a reflection that they would talk about. But I structured so that every person in the group gets like 20 seconds airtime and an introduction. So I've done that. I've also, in teaching a new course in May, I started with a meet and greet. There were 22 people in the course, so I started with a meet and greet of only 4 people at a time. So we all had our videos on and had an opportunity to just get to know each other. And then when we went to the large group, at least we had some comfort level with some people. And then I did sort of just random breakout groups, always about 4 people in terms of size, but I would select them just automatically, not having any notion about who would be with who. And I always got great feedback on them. Usually students said that they weren't long enough. I thought I was giving them a long time, but I learned to go into, as hosts, go into the breakout room and just sort of eavesdrop without saying too much, and then broadcast a message. How are we doing for time? Would 5 minutes more help, or things like that? So yeah, I think it's a great place for collaboration to happen.
I think my challenges with the breakout room were more if there were technical problems. So if students, you could put people in a breakout room, but if 2 people had mics that weren't working, that's where the challenges came in. So we would have some people with no mic, others with mics. And so those were the only little challenges. And if people are shy, once I got to know the students, it was easier to have great breakout rooms because I knew that I could put people in each group that I knew would help in case people were not talking, and that could draw that out.
I see there's a couple of comments in the chat. So if you don't mind, Marlene and Zaf, I'll
Sure.
just adjust those. And Arlene has her hand up again. Why don't you go ahead first, Arlene?
That's not a hand up, that's just
That's an applause.
That's an applause, sorry.
I agreed with Marlene, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That was my mistake. So Heather posed a question in the chat from Sioux College. How much time do you put into creating a community when there is no class-wide start or stop time? So in the asynchronous version, which we can talk a little bit more about asynchronous versus synchronous after. And Sarah from Northern mentioned the concept of having a home room that happens first of the day, which is a little bit, Marlene, sounds like a little bit like your opening time of just chatting and relaxing and getting acquainted a little bit. So thanks for sharing that, Sarah, in the chat. And Jessica commented that was a great idea. Okay. So again, you feel free to raise your hand. I see Dorothy has a hand up, so I'll call on you, Dorothy. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. One workshop I attended suggested the possibility of, while people are gathering, to share with share screen, use a whiteboard if you've previously run people through how they can type in a whiteboard. And again, it would be questions similar to what you've mentioned for chat or homeroom. Might be, what are you always going to do now that you started it since our period of isolation? And the benefit of the whiteboard is that it's semi-anonymous. The other students don't necessarily know who typed a message. So there's a comfort level there that they can participate in a different way. Plus it's a way to check on whether or not they've learned that skill. I've only used it a couple of times, and one time it went well, and one time nobody wanted to write a comment. So I don't have a lot of experience, but it was just another idea.
Thank you. I was just looking at Ferguson's comment
Heather, yeah.
About teaching and delivering and self-paced. Now, at Centennial, we have schedules, and as instructors, we're able to decide how much of we want to offer in a synchronous mode or asynchronous mode. I'm just wondering with Fergus, sorry, I don't know your first name. Sorry?
It's Heather.
Heather.
Hi, it's Heather.
Hi, Heather. Hi, Heather. Do you have the option of having any synchronous times, or is it all asynchronous delivery for you guys?
I think each of the instructors could set up a single synchronous section, like some time. So right now our courses are scheduled, say Mondays and Wednesdays, 9:30 until noon, but students can start that course at any time. So we're like, 1 week, I might have 2 students starting. This week I have
okay, I got it.
Week. So nobody's ever in the same part of the content in any of our courses. And that's just something that we've decided to keep here, because when we did try standard start-stop times, we lost out on a lot of learners because they didn't want to wait until the next semester to start. And so that's why we've had the continuous intake year-round for our courses. But given the circumstances, we find that it's challenging when they don't physically see each other in the classroom to get to know each other. In our face-to-face, the students see each other coming in, and they know that new students start on a regular basis and whatnot. And they tend to just sort of get to know each other anyway during that. And then we were running regular orientations, like every Monday morning was an orientation for new students for that week. And so the students who attended that orientation would get to know each other and whatnot. But now that everything is literally individualized right now, we're not doing group intakes. So it's a little difficult. We haven't really focused on creating community because we don't have a cohort, so to speak, that we can focus on.
I would think it'd be, or I would guess that it would be good to try the cafe hour or homeroom time where students have the option of coming in and meeting. Maybe it's a office hours where you're there and they can come in and meet with others and yourself. I don't know if that would.
Our instructors have set up, like they have their regularly scheduled classes, but they don't necessarily work time-wise for students because we find some students are more active in the evenings. So our math instructor, for example, has a set Tuesday morning, 9:30 till noon. And then she has some hours in the evening on Thursdays where she's announced that she's available. Any student can come into the chat room and through MS Teams at that time, or communicate through LMS, knowing that she will for sure respond during those times. The number of takers is really low. Our students are so used to independent learning and just doing their own thing whenever they want. So the number of students who actually show up during the scheduled times is pretty limited.
Well, Marlene, if I could, and Zaf, I'll jump in with just a wee bit of context here. There are 4, maybe 5 colleges that do semester-based block intake, and pretty well all of the other 20 are still doing continuous intake. So the shift to doing, just because people are now working virtually, that hasn't necessarily changed. So I agree, though, with some comments in the chat. It can be really difficult to build community in an asynchronous environment, for sure. I wondered if Judy could just talk for a second about the item she put in the chat about the class meetings once a week. So go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, so our program runs almost exactly the same as what Heather just described. So we have continuous intake, people at all different levels, working one-on-one with their teachers. And building community has always been something that we have had to work on because it's just a model that it doesn't foster that as easy as a cohort-based program would. So as we transferred into a virtual environment, it was also something like even more ramped up, I think, important that people felt like they were part of a community. So we're still working on it, and I have taken notes on the idea of the cafe and the homeroom because I think those are things that we could totally incorporate. But what we've done so far is have a class meeting. So our classes run Monday to Thursday, and they end Thursday afternoon at 3, and then students have Fridays off. So from 2:15 until 3 o'clock every Thursday, we have a class meeting, and one of the teachers, or it doesn't even have to be a teacher, somebody volunteers to sort of lead it. And what we do is celebrate all the achievements from the week. So if anybody passed a level or passed a unit test or overcame something that they were proud of, we kind of celebrate that. And we introduce all the new students who have started that week because we're also doing orientations every 2 weeks. And then whoever's leading the meeting kind of chooses an activity that would engage everybody that logs in. So last week we did some anti-racism work, and one of our teachers who's done a lot of work on sort of social justice pedagogy, she facilitated that, and it was amazing. Somebody led us through a kind of visualization meditation. Somebody did some kind of stress relieving exercises that people could do at their desks. People have run like challenges and contests and whatever we can think of that is sort of interesting and engaging. And then even the people who aren't logging in regularly, even if they're just emailing their teachers their work and are treating it like a completely asynchronous course, even those folks are welcome to log into the class meeting and participate in whatever the activity is that we're doing. So that's helping. We also have a Facebook group. Finally, the college sort of relaxed its concerns about programs having Facebook presences. So it's a group that's part of the college page, and it doesn't give us a ton of flexibility. Like there's limitations to what you can do on a group, but it gives us a way to keep posting announcements and just giving people information that they might not have otherwise. And I can see how many people read every posting. So I know that a lot of the students, like 3/4 of our students, are logging in and at least reading those postings. So even the folks that aren't engaged academically are still kind of present in the Facebook forum. So those are two things that I'm happy about and seem to be working a little bit.
Thanks for sharing, Judy. I think we can move on to the next topic.
Okay.
We can't hear you, Marlene.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the next topic, we've actually been talking about it because the next topic was about the balance between synchronous and asynchronous classes. But it seems like most of you here are, if I'm understanding correctly, are going the asynchronous route. So I don't know how many of you, I hear that some of you are using the virtual classrooms and do get together, but it seems like maybe most of you are using your LMS. This is a question here because I'm not too sure, but how are you all doing the asynchronous piece?
You can either jump in or raise your hand.
We
So
use
Sarah, oh, go ahead.
LMS primarily at Sioux College, so it's D2L. And
Okay.
then we also have the Office 365 at our college, so we use MS Teams, and then students can share work through Word and whatnot as well.
It's Arlene here. The asynchronous part that I did in my classes in March, April, I used some chunks of videos with little self-checks afterwards. Some of them even within the video itself. And so the students would just advance through those. But I had, of a 3-hour per week class, I actually had 2 hours synchronous and 1 hour asynchronous. So I didn't have to create a whole lot of videos. Sometimes the videos were, I should say, usually the videos were from TechSmith Relay. We use Brightspace and it integrated with TechSmith Relay. So that's what I used. I might add that I love Google Drive, and so I use Google Slides a lot for collaborating online, and that can be either synchronous or asynchronous. I set it up and demo it in the synchronous setting, of course. I use Google Docs as well for group work, and occasionally Google Forms for group work, but I use that more in just sort of a bridge-in.
I see that Megan is saying that for the synchronous classes, you see about 60% of your students. And is this a cohort base, Megan, or do you have, as Barb was saying, where you have people coming into your classes at all different times?
You can feel free to unmute if you would like to.
Hey Barb, thanks. That's probably easier. Yeah, the typing's going to take too long. So we have block intake. So most months of the year we're accepting students in, but there's a few that obviously we don't. So I would say our biggest is September, April, July, and January. But essentially we leave it up to the discretion of the teachers. So if we're offering our programming and the teacher who's on the contract wants to run synchronous, then we allow them the flexibility to do so, with the, you know, sort of caution that don't expect all your students to come on to the synchronous classes given the barriers that they face to participation, and just make sure that the recordings are available. So we're only seeing about 60% of students logging in for synchronous classes, and the rest of them are accessing materials outside of traditional hours.
So what do people think is the right balance in terms of synchronous versus asynchronous? For me, I had, with my synchronous classes, I actually found that my attendance was a lot higher than when we were in class. But I also recognize that students right now have a lot of other responsibilities, changing work schedules and so on, that can make it difficult for them to come to class.
Arlene, can we call on Sue Slesser from Georgian? She's just going to add a little context to her comment there she made a moment ago. So go ahead, Sue, and unmute.
Thanks, Barb. So at Georgian in our program, besides the science programs, we are continuous intake. So for most folks, it's continuous intake. And for myself, I've been trying to just use a combination of everything and anything to reach out to the students. We use the LMS, we're on Blackboard, so we'll use that for sure. We also use WebEx so that we can meet on that weekly basis or daily, depending on their classes. I've also been using Screencast-O-Matic for making my own videos to help describe a process or how to access Blackboard if they don't know how to do that yet, or even logging on if that's been an issue, especially for a new start. As well, you know, there's some YouTube videos, especially if they describe what they're trying to learn. So we'll post those on Blackboard, as most folks probably do. And we've been using a little bit of the Microsoft Teams as well. So it's not a one approach works. It's a multiple amounts of different or a combination of them. And it depends on the student, because I've noticed that I can overwhelm students giving them too much. So it seems to work best if we just kind of keep it simple. Even for all the YouTube videos, let's think I teach math and comm and keys to success. So if it's a math concept, sometimes if they're just stuck on one question, they will email me the question and I will actually go on my iPad and create a video with me talking and showing that exact question in the solution and then sending it to them personally. So that seems to be helpful, but it's just definitely not one or two solutions. We have to use multiple solutions. So that's what I've been using.
Thanks, Sue. Dorothy's weighed in on the question of where is the balance there in the chat.
So I agree that the balance is individual. I think it's a little bit different when we're offering it through a cohort base. Then as an instructor, I think then we have to sort of make that decision up front in terms of how much is going to be synchronous and how much is going to be asynchronous, as opposed to where you have maybe that continuous intake and students are working individually. Then the student can have a little bit more say in that. And of course, we're flexible along the way. You mentioned, Dorothy, the tech barriers, and that was one of the topics that we had as well, in terms of how does that affect us as instructors in our classrooms when we have students who do not have the technical skills, and we're not in the class where we can actually help them with this. So how do we go about ensuring that the students have the technical skills that they need to be successful in our classrooms? Have you encountered this, Saf, with your new cohort?
With my students right now, in terms of technical skills, we had used Lockdown Browser, but it does not work with Chromebooks that the college has given out. So that was a huge flaw. Now, assignments and everything have to be open book all of a sudden. Milestones, you know, the technical skills in terms of administering a milestone. How do we keep it private? You know, this is something that we are trying to explore. Instead of having them housed or logged in for 2 hours or 3 hours, what we did was we give them a full day to do them. And the students are, I can't write on a PDF, I don't have a printer, how do I type? So you have to go and give them alternative formats, like, okay, so you post a question, give them fillable format for Word. But again, it's accessibility, because I had about 4 students in a class of 20 who were trying to log in from their phones. And they can't do any of those things from their phone. So that was another problem that we had.
Yeah, I think that's
Connectivity.
I think that's a pretty widespread problem, Zaf, because certainly just the access to the technology, whether it's hardware or software, is a huge barrier across all of our programs and all of the LBS sectors and streams. And a lot of this work can't be done on a phone. It's true. And they can't go to a library right now. Maybe soon they could, use a library computer and so on, but certainly not right now. And Allison in the chat has mentioned, yes, also equipment and internet access, not just the skills. Some of them may have the skills, but not have the equipment or internet access.
I know that at our college, our students who did not have the technology were able to get, I think, computers or tablets, I'm not too sure what, from the college. So we were able to get that to our students. I don't know what they did in terms of internet access. But I would imagine that the skills as well can be a challenge. I know that for me, as I said, transitioning over to the online delivery was not a difficult transition because I had been preparing my students for it for quite some time. But it took a long time for them to get comfortable with the skills involved to access a virtual classroom, for example, or even using our LMS and the different tools there. And so I'm just wondering how you as instructors sort of prepare students for that or help them through learning those skills.
I just wanted to make a comment, and Sharon from Cambrian College, Sudbury. One of the things I've done with milestones is I would put it on my Zoom screen, share it with the student so I can watch them do it. And they would just write their answers on a paper, put their name and date. If they had to draw a chart, they would draw a chart. Obviously, it was for certain ones. And I would just get them to take a picture of their answers and send it to me by their phone. And most people know how to take a picture and send a picture through their phone. They may not know how to do that through a computer or through software, but they definitely know how to do it with their phone. So that is another option. If you have a student who struggles with it, I can watch them. I can watch them do it. I know I can see that it's my student, so I can justify that it is that student. But that's just another option that students seem to know how to do. Like they do know how to use their camera and send a picture.
Thanks, Sharon. That's excellent.
I'm going to jump in just with a general comment about milestones. And if some of you participate in the virtual services weekly meetings that we have, we've certainly talked about this a fair bit. The ministry has not come out with any definitive direction about milestone administration other than we'll get back to you. And they've really just, in the vein of all of the services we're providing, just said, don't alter our forms, and whatever way you're doing online service delivery, whether it's in terms of registrations or, you know, getting signatures in any form, just make sure you're adhering to privacy and security standards that that keep everything secure. So lots of us have, you know, been doing what we can in terms of that service delivery, and some people have attempted to do some milestones, others haven't, but there hasn't been any clear direction from the ministry on what they would, quote, approve or disapprove. And so in the absence of that, people are trying to just follow those guidelines of making things as secure as possible and as legitimate as possible, or just not doing milestones. I know of a number of delivery sites that are maybe even taking in registrations and delivering programming, or maybe just delivering programming, but aren't going down the milestone road just right now.
I think keeping milestones secure is really difficult when you have to send them out to students.
Mm-hmm. I see Heather also has a comment in the chat. Currently, if students do not have access to unlimited data or internet, we recommend they wait to start a program until we're back on campus. Yep, that's a fair comment. We certainly do that in ACE Distance. I mean, one of the questions right up front is, do you have a laptop or a desktop computer, and do you have reliable internet access, you know, to engage in online? And it's a little different for ACE Distance because there is an expectation going in that they're signing up for an online program. However, as I said in a webinar this morning, our folks who are with us now really didn't sign up for online, you know, for the most part. And it's nice, Marlene, you were able to prepare your students ahead of time a little bit, but I think the majority weren't able to do that kind of preparation. And so we have a lot of students out there who really didn't sign up to engage online and would rather just wait till we are maybe at some point back in face-to-face, and others who are jumping at the chance to do online if they have the technology and the skills. I'll pop the agenda back up on the screen here for a second. There we go.
I think in talking about milestones, we're kind of going into our last topic, wherein how do we administer online testing? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges when we're moving from an in-class format to an online format is how do we test students, and how do we ensure that they're not cheating. For example, I had a colleague that had a horrible experience in this last semester, and she said that they just, almost everyone cheated. They had to put a lot of, I guess, write up a lot of students for cheating, and just had a lot of difficulty in figuring out how to go about doing this in a way that works. I teach English, so for me, some of the online format, for example, in terms of writing a timed test or any kind of writing, I could easily do through my LMS. And so we were already used to doing that. And one of the ways that I would kind of try to mitigate some of the cheating that may happen was, for one thing, I would always password protect any of the quizzes that I'd create, so that when if I wanted students to start at a particular time, they had to come online, meet with me first as a group, and then I'd say, okay, we're all now going to start this test. They could open up the platform, the LMS, and then at that time get the password for the test. So they wouldn't have access until they got that from me. Once they start it, I can easily go in and change the questions that I have on that quiz, so that anybody who delays their start and thinks, let's say it's a essay topic that they're getting, if they think they can get it from somebody else, start working on it, and then later sign in. When they sign in, there's another question there. So there's different ways of sort of mitigating that. The other thing, our students do have access to one of the publishers' learning centers where they can go on and do some of their testing, their reading tests there. And I would set times on it so it only open at a certain time and close at a certain time, so that they hopefully don't have enough time to really be discussing with others and getting those answers, because they will time out. So these are some of the things that I've done. Of course, we do try and do some randomized tests, but that takes time, and I think over time we'll get more questions in that. But at this point, for me, I would need more time to have a lot more questions that can help in that way. Zaf, any thoughts?
The passwords are excellent. Just a little tip on the password. Sometimes we lock our PDFs and forget passwords ourselves. That has happened to me. So, and you don't want to be semester specific when you're changing a whole bunch of quizzes. So I just, use like my initials and use like summer, so M 2020, and then send it to the students. It's interesting how we cannot change the milestones, which is true. We're not changing them, but what we can do is we can actually, especially for milestone 7 or 14, these ones, the ones where we get to pick our own articles, I create forms and send them a PDF form. This way they can just type in little spaces and then send it back to me. It's better, faster, and then I use them as assignments as well within the course by giving them marks, so they have an incentive to actually do something like that. At the same time, there is a tool, 2 tools actually. There's one called Respondus. I'm pretty sure a whole bunch of you all who are using the asynchronous model know exactly what Respondus does. It changes our word questions to a feedable format into our LMS, where they can become online tests. What I have done is I'm using TestGen. So TestGen, the desktop version of TestGen, it's provided by Pearson. You can just create your own questions in TestGen. And yes, Respondus is one. I will share the link to that in the chat box. And then the easier one, I personally think the easier one is TestGen. It's basically a software where you can go and create short answer questions, multiple choice questions, essay questions, set points for that, like do marks for that, and then D2L and Blackboard and all these LMS will actually take a format from that and directly put it under quizzes. So you don't have to go and recreate the whole thing. It's easier. So that's something that I'm doing right now. Okay. Does anybody want to share what they're doing with making the tests private or moving stuff which is online? Okay, while we're doing that, I'm just going to share the link to Respondus as promised.
And I'm just going to jump in for a sec. I realize some people may have to leave at different times. We would really appreciate it if you would click on the link that I just put in the chat, and I'll repost it, just to do a very quick feedback form around the session. It's only about 6 multiple choice questions. And I will repost that link a couple of times over the next 15-20 minutes. If you scroll up in the chat just a bit, you'll see it there. You can click directly on it.
Okay, so I just want to answer to Valerie's comment about why creating the quiz in TestGen instead of doing it on LMS. Now, my TestGen I've been using it with different banks, which are questions from the publishers and the questions that I have created in the past. And for me, instead of going to the LMS and creating, I have to list all the options one by one, set up their worth, and then pick the right answer. And there's a lot of time that goes into, especially in D2L, to do the questions. So that's why I'm using TestGen. You're welcome.
Marlene, we can't hear you.
Okay, so.
Thank you. Heather, you said that you use secure Word documents using snapshots of the milestones. Can you explain how you do that?
So when you open the milestone from the ministry in PDF format, I think it's under File or Edit. There's a thing that says Snapshot, and you can take picture of an individual page from the PDF document and then paste it into a Word document. So it's the exact same milestone. It can't be altered in any way. And then you enter text boxes in the spaces that students would normally write in their answers. And then under, I think it's, I'm trying to remember. And then when you're in Word, there is, of course I'm not in Word right now and I don't remember the term. But in Word, there's an area where you can, as the creator, lock the text boxes so they can't be accidentally deleted, that content can't be changed or anything like that. I'm just looking for the term here.
And the text boxes can be placed on top of that PDF?
The lines, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
The text boxes just go in place of the lines that are in the PDF.
Okay.
And it'll just say enter answer here. And then it's locked so the students can't adjust the form in any way. So we started doing that simply, developer, thanks Jen, our math professor's on. So yeah, the text box and restrictions are in the developer tab in MS Word.
Okay.
I see a couple of questions in the chat as well around mathematical formula, which Word does have the that function, but it's not the best. And another question from Bran around, I think that was directed at you, Zaf. Is that the same reason why you're not using Google Forms in terms of recreating or using the TestGen functions?
Yes, this is Bran. Thanks, Barb. That's exactly my question to Zaf. Is that why you're using the TestGen and not Google Forms for the same reason? Is it just too onerous for you to type out the question, choose multiple choice? This is an essay question. This is a short answer. Did you find the TestGen simpler, or is it very similar to Google Forms, which is what I use for my testing?
Okay, so TestGen is a little easier because I can use my own images to go inside the question and I can change the questions. Plus, if you can do multiple versions of the test, it's easier to do it on the TestGen. You can change all the mathematical questions to different versions of the question as well. So you can just do multiple tests and keep changing them all the time. It's easier to do that on TestGen than on Google Forms because you'll have to retype everything. But there's an algorithm in TestGen which is built in for some of the questions, and it's easier for us to just switch them. Okay, and the other thing that I want to talk about is there's a Google equation word editor is good to use, but then we have equation editor built into our LMS, which is really nice too. It makes it clear, and I use it for chemistry. I use the word editor to show step-by-step conversions. Also, in terms of math, I show them all the steps, which is recorded in Word, and then I transfer them as PDF files to the students or to the active class. So it's when I'm talking, I record everything, and instead of writing on a tablet, I just type it out. I just find it easier because it's all organized and it's done in one shot rather than me typing on a whiteboard, or sorry, writing on a whiteboard.
Does anybody else have anything to add? Any other challenges?
I just put another plug for completing our little feedback form. Jennifer, you're very welcome. I hope you stay well also. And I'm going to share my screen for one more minute here.
I just wondered if any schools have started to talk about any kind of hybrid or partial in-person, partial distance combination at all for the fall or beyond at your campuses?
So for Centennial College, I know that I'm pretty sure that I will be home, working from home all of this year and also winter semester. So we know that they are starting late in September and that we're also going to have a late start in January because we're going to be online. I think the priority is for them to get the programs that require the labs to have some time on campus. But anybody that can teach from home, we expect to continue teaching from home.
Megan, I think you had your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I did. Durham College is anticipating the same sort of thing. The post-secondary programs are trying to utilize as much campus space as possible in the fall semester if they're allowed to go back, to facilitate any hands-on learning that must have been required previously for students in order to graduate. So they're essentially telling us that they're planning for all possible delivery methods starting in September, but the general consensus that we're getting is that we're going to be running online from September to December.
Great, thanks, Megan. I have heard that from a number of colleges as well in some of the other weekly meetings that we're hosting, that's likely the plan. It sounds, I also believe that the vice president's academic have certainly tried to maintain a bit of a unified approach to how things are going to move forward, and the presidents as well. Understanding that there are some regional or local issues that might have to be contended with. Heather's put a note in the chat: for those who want instructions for the PDF milestone conversion, please email me at heatherferguson@siouxcollege.ca. I'll send the instructions to you once they've typed them up. And Heather, if you send them to me, I'll post them in the Dropbox that I'm creating for our shared forms.
Okay, will do.
Thank you so much. Any other, okay, Zaf has said for math tests, please check CUDA software. Thank you for that, Zaf. So thanks so much, very much to Merlene and Zafar for moderating and facilitating today. It's always great to come and come together with our group and share some strategies. It's again, you know, we're experiencing, you know, in a session like today, what our students are often experiencing. So it's nice. I think it's important for us to be on both sides of the screen, so to speak. And wanted to leave you with a happy, smiley dog for the rest of the day. So Happy Doggo says, have a great day. And I hope that we can get back together soon. We do have virtual frontline services, open informal roundtable meetings every week, and they're Wednesdays at 11 o'clock. Many of you participate in those. And if you are interested in joining, your manager always has the Outlook invitation for them. Some of your colleagues may also have it. It's a bit hard to keep an up-to-date email list for that because the participants come and go from those weekly meetings. But if you are looking for a link to it, either ask your manager or feel free to email me directly. So the next one is actually tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And they're usually around 50 or 60 attendees. It's informal. We just identify a few issues and talk about them, and very much the same as today, just share information about what's happening from college to college. We'll have a great rest of the day. We'll talk to some of you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Thanks,
possibly
everyone.
at tomorrow's 4 o'clock PD session as well. So take care, everyone. Thanks again, Zafar and Merlene.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Thanks, Marlene.
Thanks.
Well, I think we had, I was watching the participants. There was about 49 at the height of the session. So that was
I noticed some similar names with iPad versus no iPad. So they try to get onto different devices, a few of them. So that doubles up. Yeah.
Anne-Marie, do you have a few minutes to stay online with me here?
Sure. Oh, did you say me, Marlene?
No, sorry, I said Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, okay.
Okay.
All right, have a good afternoon.
Okay, thanks again, Aunt Marlene.
Bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bar.
All right, bye.
Hang on, Anne-Marie, I'm just texting Robin. All right, so how are you?
Sorry, I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
Must be tired.
Oh, I know. I had a session this morning with 87 people.
What was the one this morning?
It was what you would have probably remembered it as the online community of practice.
Oh, yeah.
And it's now called, we changed the name last year, it's called Pop-Up PD.
Okay.
So it's, a selection of support orgs and regional networks that put this in as a deliverable in their business plans. I think there's about 7 of us on the little committee. It's mostly the regional networks, but I think they originally invited Arlene to be on the committee because she was an e-channel, deliverer. And so it sort of crosses, it goes into my business plan for the CSC, but it really in some ways also intersects with ACE distance. So anyway, we had scheduled, I don't know, a couple of themes for this year's 6 webinars, but we flipped that fairly quickly after COVID-19. And we've done 2 sessions so far. One was called Lean on Me, and the other was that I did this morning was called Lean on Each Other. And so it, again, is really just a roundtable for, sharing supports and strategies. And the first one, which Tamara Cottery facilitated, was around supports kind of within the organization for staff and employees. And then the one I did this morning was around supports for learners, non-academic supports. How are people helping learners to cope with the non-academic challenges that they're facing? So
yeah,
it was on Adobe Connect though, not on Zoom.
This session I found very good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This was excellent. Wow,
Yeah.
Facilitator was good, and just some of the ideas were just very good and just very insightful, and just the whole notion of learners being uncomfortable on Zoom and how to mitigate some of that and reduce some of the anxiety, and then all kinds of creative ideas on how to use technology to get the work done, I guess, the work, right? So
yep. And it's this was kind of a subset of our Wednesday morning meetings because it was more directed at faculty and actually about teaching and engaging online. But we all learn from these sessions. I mean, I can't imagine anybody would go on and not walk away with something new.
No, this was really good. Very practical kinds of things. But the one piece that I found really interesting, like depending on how long we have to kind of live in this world, just the whole notion that students are on day and night.
Yep.
and how faculty are going to try and manage that, you know, over time, right? But most of these folks are really preferring an asynchronous kind of get to it when I can and manage it around everything else. Right now, hopefully kids will be back at school in the fall to some degree, but you know, faculty who are used to the 9 to 3 classroom environment, I think will soon, you know, I'm not sure where that'll go, that, you know, they're responding to students day and night. And I mean, and some probably would be already in those classrooms